Okay. Hello, everyone. So first of all, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Mindaugas. I'm from a Lithuanian Energy Agency. I work at Energy Efficiency Competence Center as a data analyst. And today I will share with you some of information and the results regarding energy saving agreements in Lithuania. So in Lithuania, we have two main strategies and two main laws, which are related with energy efficiency. And they also include rules and obligations from EU's Energy Efficiency Directive. There are also 10 bylaws, which includes more detailed information about energy efficiency achievement for different interested parties and different sectors. Now, based on directives Article 8, the energy saving target for Lithuania is more than 39 terawatt hours until 2030s, and we have already achieved more than 7.5 terawatt hours of saved energy. In the table below, you can see the main policy measures and their impact to the energy saving target. And the main ones are multi-apartment building renovation, excises and taxes on road fuels, and of course energy saving agreements, which will account for about 17% of total saved energy. Now let's move on to the main topic of today's presentation, which is energy saving agreements. And for Lithuanian Energy Agency, we can identify three main functions. So first of all is to evaluate calculations from implemented energy efficiency measures. Next is to prepare reports for energy for Ministry of Energy, and finally to make some recommendations for further actions. Now we have two types of agreements. So first is energy efficiency obligations, which is mandatory for all state-owned energy suppliers, electricity and gas suppliers. Also, other energy suppliers can sign these agreements, but they are not obligated to do this. The input of these agreements members are technical and financial contribution, and there are 33 enterprises who have signed agreements. The other type of agreements is educational and consulting agreements, which is mandatory for all energy suppliers, including electricity, gas, and heat suppliers. And the input of members are educational and consulting activities, and these measures are related with energy consumers' behavioral change. And also there are 61 energy suppliers who have signed these agreements. Now, I have mentioned before that we have some functions related with this agreement. So first we have to evaluate all calculations of implemented measures and to verify at least 20% of documentation of implemented measures. Of course, we try to verify even more documents because we try to to increase the quality of submitted document. Now there are over 100 energy efficiency improvement measures that are planned until 2030s, and here are energy efficiency obligation measures. In the table, you can see the most frequent measures. So, for example, lighting modernization, building automation and control system implementation, renewal of vehicle fleet, and building modernization. So now a little bit about the results from energy efficiency obligations. So from 2022 implemented measures, we have already accumulated more than 16 gigawatt hours of saved energy. And in the pie chart, you can see my mentioned goal for Lithuania, which is more than 39 terawatt hours of energy savings, of which 5.5 terawatt hours is due to energy efficiency obligations. Now we already have 3.75 terawatt hours of saved energy from our plant measures, and we still need to acquire 1.75 terawatt hour from future agreements, new agreements, or new implemented measures. When submitting documents, supporting documents about implemented measures, energy suppliers sometimes make mistakes, and these mistakes often related with inaccurate calculations used. And we suggested 6 tools which energy suppliers can use to ensure the better quality of their calculations. And also we presented these tools during the meeting with energy efficiency obligation members on March 4th. Now let's move on to another type of energy efficiency agreements. It is education and consulting agreements. And in the table, you can see the most popular measures. And as I mentioned before, they are related with consumers' behavioral change. So, for example, publication of information about energy saving on the internet, on the website, in the press or television, and so on. On the left side, you can see the formula we use to calculate energy savings from these measures. And basically, we take all amount of supplied energy to the targeted group of consumers and multiply that amount with the energy saving coefficient, which is different for each measure. Now the results from education and consulting agreements. In the graph, you can see 2 columns side by side. First bigger column represents what energy suppliers declared when they submitted the documents, what energy they saved. And the other smaller column represents what we accepted after the documents were verified. So in 2018 and 19, you can see there's a big gap, but since it was the beginning of agreements implementation, energy suppliers made a lot of mistakes when submitting documents, and sometimes they were not submitting documents at all. And also there were some duplicated information. For next 2 years, the situation got a little bit better. Only 2022, you can see there's a bigger gap, but it is due to, it's because one energy supplier submitted, declared 10 times bigger savings than it actually was. Of course, our goal is to ensure that this gap is smaller as possible. So due to this reason, we developed some guidelines for education and consulting agreements measures implementation, which energy suppliers can use and ensure the better quality of the documents. Now I'd like to finish my presentation with some results from our survey that we did last year. The main goal of the survey was to study the energy consumption habits of Lithuanian residents. And first of all, we asked about energy efficiency information applicability, and the majority of the respondents said that they notice information about energy efficiency on different media channels. From those respondents who have noticed the energy saving tips, they adapted these tips, and about 64%, 65% saw a decrease in energy consumption. So overall, about 30% of all respondents who adapted energy saving tips saw some positive results because the energy consumption decreased. And finally, we asked about do energy suppliers communicate with consumers effectively? So once again, majority of respondents often or sometimes saw information about energy saving from their energy suppliers. But on the other hand, more than a half of respondents do not read information on their energy supplier's website, nor do they get any additional information, especially consumers benchmarking. So we can conclude that there is still room for better communication between energy supplier and energy consumer. And that would be it about energy saving agreements. Thank you for your attention.
Any question from the room about the Lithuanian agreements? Yes, please.
Yes, thank you. I have one question. If I understood it correctly, that only the state-owned energy suppliers are the obligated parties, and the others could join freely if they want. Is it correct? And isn't it causing some competitive advantage for them who are not obliged to take part in this, or how does it working?
Okay, so first part of the question, I can answer that yes, all state-owned energy suppliers are obligated to sign these agreements, and others can join if they want. About the competition, I do not have any comments, but maybe my colleagues can add some information, and after, I don't know, during the break.
Any other questions on the agreement? No. Thank you very much, Mindaugas. And now we will be moving to the Netherlands and to buildings. I welcome. I'm sorry for my pronunciation of your name, so maybe I will ask you to. I will call you René, and you will tell your family name better than me. Thanks a lot, René. The floor is
you. Yeah. Well, I'll start off with telling you my name, which is René, which is French. Schellekens, which is my last name, which is a bit harder for most citizens of other countries, I suppose. I'm actually the expert on energy poverty for the Netherlands, but Jean-Sébastien, he asked me to give a presentation on our approach towards a more sustainable built environment in the Netherlands. We've got quite an extensive approach for that. And as soon as the presentation is up, I'll start my presentation. So this is an interesting picture as well, I guess. So hello to the people online. It's about the same amount of people as are in the audience here. So I think all in all, we're about 70 people attending this presentation. The presentation is on accelerating sustainability in the built environment in the Netherlands. And let's see, how does this work? Not really. Oh, that's the one. Okay, well, that helps. We've got 2030 goals. The goals are on insulation. It's about 1 million rented houses that we want insulated by 2030. 1.5 million private houses and 120 non-residential buildings we want insulated. We've got an extensive insulation program for that. I'll come back to that later. We want to produce 1.6 billion cubic meters of green gas. We want 1 million hybrid heat pumps in 2030 and 500,000 heat grid connections in 2030. That's what the program is aiming at. So we've got a program with 4 lines in it. There's actually a 5th one, which I'll get to at the end of my presentation. The lines are a district approach, which is line 1. Line 2 is the individual approach for houses. Line 3, utility buildings, and line 4 is mostly aimed at sources and infrastructure in the Netherlands. So the first few slides are on line 1. And line 1 is the first and most important one that is up now, is the National Insulation Program. It has several targets. This one's on the local infrastructure for insulation programs. It's aimed at subsidizing municipality to take charge of the insulation programs within their municipalities. And it's important to know that for the entire energy transition, I hear an echo, which is the energy transition within the Netherlands is the municipalities are the ones that are responsible for that. They direct the energy efficiency within the energy transition within their boundaries. Well, that's a bit fast. I'll go back. Where were we? We were here. Yeah. This is quite a substantive subsidy program, 1 billion in total of euros. And it opened in March 2023. But this is not the only program up and running. There's a sideline within this aiming at people in energy poverty, which makes sure that people in energy poverty are also insulating their houses. And there's people actually going door to door at the energy poor. I won't get into the details, but if you have questions on that, you can ask me later. You can read here what the aim of the program is. I won't read it for you. I think the most important thing to know is that the subsidy is aimed at municipalities, and each municipality has their own approach towards how to get the households involved to actually insulate their houses. So not every municipality might be the same. we have set up a scheme for the municipalities so they can learn from each other, so that well, there's more and more similarities between municipalities. So there are differences regionally. In line 1, we also have a program on hybrid heat pumps. Actually, in 2026, if you change your boiler system or whatnot, you need to install at least a hybrid heat pump or a heat pump, or you connect to district heating. So no more traditional CV systems as of 2026. There's an action plan and a public campaign for that. And we also target the installation branch for that, because they're important. Current steps, and those are actually all kinds of legal instruments for municipalities to take charge of the energy transition. There's some Dutch in there. It all has to do with the heat transition and to empower municipalities to do the things that they should do. The first one gives them the power to actually take charge of disconnecting people from the natural gas supply. Of course, there's some, they can't do that just from one day to the other. There's all sorts of things in place for that. And for the other one is aimed at collective systems like heat, district heating systems and such. We try to facilitate municipalities financially, but also through programs to distribute knowledge that we gain. And for this support, we set up a different national program, Local Heat Transition, and there's a narrative for this. The narrative is, and that was actually asked by the municipalities and the provinces in the Netherlands to have this narrative to take the politicians locally along with the journey that we're on in our energy transition. So in this narrative, there's room for why the heat transition. Well, all things mentioned there are obvious to you, I suppose. What's it about? So what do we encounter in our journey towards the heat transition? And municipalities as a director, and what does that actually mean? What does it mean that they have to do in this function as a director of the approach? And then the approach itself. The program line 2 is the individual approach. The first line was on how we are going to do this district by district. And in the individual approach, it's aimed at privately owned houses. There's substantial subsidies for that. And on an average, people can get 30% of their investments subsidized. But we go up to 100% for the energy poor. There's also rules and regulations in place for that. And we have a lot of attention for tailor-made measures for everything. And one of our more difficult targets is apartment buildings, because people living in there, oh, that's very hard to explain in English, but they have some joint responsibility for the building, and they have to agree, at least 70% of the people living in an apartment building have to agree with the measures taken in that apartment building. And so we're targeting that group of apartment buildings differently. And we run into problems as well, because 70% of people might be willing to refurbish the apartment building. And we actually encountered apartment buildings of which people were voted out of their building because they couldn't afford to join. So that's a problem that we still have to target. There's all sorts of financing possibilities for that as well through the heat fund. The heat fund is some sort of regulation for house owners where they can lend money to usually 0% interest. So that makes it interesting for people. let's see, that's about it. Well, on the rental sector, there's performance agreements made with the social housing corporations. These performance agreements are made on a national level with the Association of Social Housing Corporations, but every municipality makes their own performance agreements. And the thing that we have to do is help municipalities to make sure that the national agreements are at least part of that local agreement as well, and preferably a bit further than that. Let's see, what can I say about that? I think one of the most important thing is that the phasing out of the worst energy labels by 2028. That's part of that agreement. And what we see is that social housing corporations are working quite hard to reach that target. And that costs them a lot of effort and money, of course. There's not a lot of money involved in this because regulations have changed, which makes social housing corporations having to pay less to the national government for certain other measures that they can use to implement the more sustainable measures in their houses. Let's see, line 3 is the utility buildings approach. Utility buildings are different as well. We've got the public buildings and we've got the other utility buildings. We've got all sorts of subsidy schemes in place for that as well. And looking at the public buildings, these run through the provinces. The provinces set up schemes for the public buildings in their province to actually make their buildings more sustainable. And we also think this is very important as they have a role in showing people how we can do these things. So we hope to make use of the public buildings to involve the other utility buildings as well, because we have good examples in the public building sectors. On the horizon is also the phasing out of buildings with bad energy labels, as we do everywhere. I think one of the most interesting arrangements that we have is the DUMAVA arrangement for public property, and that's, I think, a very good example, where we made 12 sectoral roadmaps for 12 various variable public building, well, kinds of public buildings. That's about it. If you wanted to know more, we've got the concerted actions on by tomorrow, and the expert on DUMAVA is there. So people joining the concerted actions, feel free to ask Kirsten, is her name, about this arrangement. Program line 4 is heat sources and gases. There's the obligation to mix in green gas for up to 20% in 2030. That's within there. What we also encounter within municipalities and working on districts is that they want districts on green gas. And that's a bit of a problem because most of the green gas will be available mostly to the industry and not as much to housing. Actually, we want to make reservations for housing that is very hard to insulate or to otherwise heat to make use of green gas. So it's not just green gas for everyone, but it's mixed in. So there's a special program on green gas, and there's also the problem with, well, it's not a problem, but there's discussion about hydrogen as well, because working on housing, people hear about hydrogen and they think, well, that's an easy solution. We don't have to do much about our houses. So there's a lot of discussion on a municipal level with people thinking that hydrogen is the option to go for. And we have to explain that it's not. So we've got lots of discussions there, but interesting nonetheless. The other thing is sustainable heat sources and infrastructure. So as you can see on the picture as well, we're setting up large district heating systems. And one of the interesting things about the central heating systems that are being put in place now is that they have to be 51% the shares have to be for 51% public. So there where we privatized the entire energy sector, the district heating sector is becoming more public again, which I think is a good thing, but that's personal. Let's see, then we've got this line 5, which is aimed at innovative and sustainable buildings. So that's more our innovations program, where we look at strengthening innovative ecosystems. Conditions for upscaling need to be filled in. So we combine things like nature inclusive buildings, circular buildings, things like that, and how to incorporate sustainable energy, sun on roof, and how to do that in a way that is for some people less offensive architecturally, things like that. What have we achieved up to now? How am I time-wise? 2 minutes, yeah. We achieved quite a few things. We went from 30 megatons CO2 in 1990 to 20 megatons in 2023, on our way to 2030, where we where we're aiming at 10 megatons. So I think we're doing quite all right. The number of EFG energy labels has decreased, respectively 33,000 less in the year 2021 and 55,000 less in the year 2022. So that's for that year. That's not compared to other years. Also, there was 11% less natural gas used in houses and 7% less in utilities compared to 2022 in 2023. So 11% in a year is not bad, I think. Of course, we had the energy crisis to help us. So crises are good for something, usually. In 2023, we had 100,000 heat pumps installed and 125,000 households took insulation measures subsidized, and that's twice as much as the year before. Another benefit from a crisis, I think. And 100,000 households increased the energy efficiency in their house through the National Heat Fund. So by taking out loans of the National Heat Fund. That's it for now. Questions? Yeah.
Taking out buildings of the lowest labor categories, and so what is the standard that you bring them up? It's nearly zero or zero right away.
Well, I wish it was so. I think looking at social housing corporations, they usually end up at label B somewhere. So it would be preferable to go to zero energy housing, especially looking at my perspective from the energy poverty side. Zero housing would be best for people, but it costs a lot more money, and the money is not available, and it's not always possible in every building. So I think it's good that they're abolished, these lower levels, but it would be better to put it out a bit more. But the agreement is at least C, mostly it's label B, I think, and some A's, A++ as well. Yeah. I'll do the walking. Yeah. Okay.
Thanks. Really interesting presentation. The condominium collective ownership issue. So if you're below the threshold of income, for example, to qualify for 100% subsidy, could you also claim 100% subsidy for your share of the works that the condominium ownership authority needs to undertake?
Very good question, and it's something we're working on. Once we saw that this happened, that people who are actually voted out of their condominium, we thought we have to do something, and we're looking into diversifying these subsidy schemes in that way, but we're not quite there yet. So there's action being taken, but it's not actually on that level that we would want it to be. but it's something that we have an eye out for. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
Thank you. Do you have any data about how many buildings are renovated without any subsidy scheme, or that's not the case in Netherlands because all the renovations are subsidized somehow?
I can give a very simple example of my own house. I renovated that. It's built in 1934. I did not use any subsidies, so no one knows. And if no one knows my house, there'll be lots more that we don't know of. So yeah, and as long as I don't move, I don't need to update my energy label. So there's no insight in people that are stable in the place where they live and don't use subsidies. Yeah. So I think that's a problem everywhere in a way. Yeah. And not everyone is as stupid as me to do it without subsidies, of course, but that's different. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you very much, René. Thanks for the very interesting presentation. I think that's a good package that you introduced to us, and also for managing the questions directly. So that's very, very much appreciated. Now we move from buildings to transport, and that will be an overall overview of the member state measures.
Yes, thank you. So we're going from the micro, some really interesting micro presentations, to the macro. So yeah, I'm Sam Thomas from the Regulatory Assistance Project, one of the partners in the ENSMOV project. And well, first thing to say is I'm not a transport expert, but I am going to talk about the transport measures. But so I've got a question for the audience. So who in this, so we're all energy efficiency experts, right? Or kind of. And we probably all have a sector we know best. So who would say that transport was the sector they knew best in this audience? Okay, we got one kind of at the back corner from Didier. So yeah, I think that probably tells us something about the forgotten sector that is transport when we talk about energy efficiency. But that is something of an oversight, I would say, because transport has actually got the highest share in final energy consumption of any sector. It's 30%. And the other sectors like industry, residential, commercial are in the 15 to 20s. So there's potentially, it's quite a lot of potential, and but most of the transport policies are handled by our transport ministries, and I think there's definitely a fair bit of siloing going on between different sectors in governments, as I certainly knew when I was in the British government. It was very difficult to make connections with the transport department, and also to get the transport department to take energy efficiency and indeed emissions reductions as seriously as the energy and climate change department. So a bit of an overview. So this is, I don't know if we can get rid of that cross. But anyway, I think we can tell what it says. So number of transport measures. So this is from the NECPRs, so the National Energy and Climate Plan reports in 2023. We can see that there was around 350 measures reported by member states, of which 67 were transport measures and 43 were cross-cutting that also include some transport actions. So roughly about 20% of the actions were transport, and then some more in the cross-cutting. On the right, you can see the ones that actually had savings associated with them. So it's roughly the same proportions, but a smaller pie. So what were the measures? So they cut across these, quite often in transport policy, we talk about avoid, shift, improve, it's a bit like the waste hierarchy. You've got the kind of the things that are at the top of the kind of the top of the pyramid, the inverted pyramid, avoid, and typically actually these things would be like integrated land use planning, things like that mean that people live closer to their shops and offices so they don't have to do so much travel. These days it might also include things like teleworking at home. So you're basically reducing the need to travel. We don't see any of those types of policy measures being reported for Article 8. We do, however, see a lot of taxation, and you can say that that is partly about avoid, because probably quite a lot about avoid, because if you increase the cost of transport fuels, then some people won't be able to afford to travel as much. So you're avoiding travel, but it's not exactly an energy efficiency measure. You're both reducing the output, less travel, and reducing the input, less fuel, without any welfare, well, with a welfare loss. It also, of course, taxation leads to some shifting between measures if you're making one type of transport mode cheaper than another. And it also might lead to some improvement. So if you increase the price of fuels, then maybe people invest more in more efficient transport. So taxation kind of cuts across these three aspects. Then on the shift side, well, we do have, quite a few modal shift policy measures that are being reported. We heard already from Germany earlier about making transport, public transport cheaper with the ticket. In Italy, we've got the Ferro bonus, the Mare bonus, that's associated with freight transport, and there's also one from Portugal. These are not exhaustive. These the countries in the brackets. Then we have kind of infrastructure type improvements like cycling to work infrastructure in Slovakia, the densification, so more public transport in Portugal. And then investment in new railway lines, for example, Estonia with Baltic Rail. And then on the improved side, so this is about improving the efficiency of the vehicles that are, well, on the road mostly. So we've got some vehicle replacement incentives in many countries. We've got regulations on freight transport in Finland. And we've got electric bus programs in various places, Czech Republic, Czechia and Germany. Then on the improved side, we've also got eco-driving, so the kind of more behavioral type measures. So for the given, for the existing equipment, can you drive it more efficiently? And we've got some eco-driving policy measures in our list of reported policy measures. Now then, coming back to our measures reporting savings in 2021. So here's our pie chart. Remember, we've got about 20% in the transport bucket and maybe 10 to 15% in the cross-cutting, including transport. But if we then look at the savings, the picture changes quite a lot. So the transport measures are delivering significantly less, about 10%, and it's the cross-cutting measures that are delivering about half of the savings. And these are things, well, let's have a look and see what those are. So on the transport side, so remember that's that quite small part of the pie before. We've got taxation measures, subsidies, and then some other measures. And then on the cross-cutting measures, we've got, again, taxation, and actually quite a lot of that is associated with transport fuels. We've got the energy efficiency obligation schemes, that's making up the other massive proportion. And actually, we think that it's quite hard to know, but as far as we can tell, not many of the savings in energy efficiency obligation schemes are coming from transport measures. And yeah, I just needed to do that, just kind of, because we've got two different pies here. So the one on the transport side is a lot smaller than the one on the right, which is the cross-cutting measures. Now, if we combine the transport and cross-cutting measures and then compare what we expect to see between 2021 and 2030, it tells us something quite instructive about the savings that we've seen in 2021. So on the left, you can see all those savings I mentioned before in taxation, energy efficiency obligation schemes, and other in 2021. So those are the savings reported in 2021. Now, if those same savings were reported every single year, 2021, 2022, 2023, all the way through to 2030, and we assume that all the taxation measures have a one-year lifetime, which is basically the guidance that's in the Commission's guidance note. And all of the other savings have 10-year lifetimes. So in energy efficiency obligation schemes, you're putting in, I don't know, sort of building fabric type measures that have a lifetime at least of 10 years. Then we can see the proportion of savings from taxation really shrinks to very little. and the proportion of savings from the other measures is a much higher percentage of the savings in 2030. And given that we think that most of the transport measures in the cross-cutting are in the taxation bucket, and most of the measures in the obligation schemes are not transport measures, I think it's basically telling us that transport, by the time we get to 2030, is not going to be contributing very much to member states' achievement of their obligations, unless something changes. But there's one really problematic issue with respect to savings from transport and getting more savings, and that's an existing policy. So the EU's new vehicles CO2 standards, which they're a great policy measure, they're going to drive a lot of savings in the transport sector, but what they do is restrict the additionality you can get from new vehicle replacement of cars and vans under Article 8 EED, unless you're making early replacements like vehicle scrappage schemes. So I guess the lesson of the story is that if you want to make more savings from transport measures in the future, unless there are some ways of getting additionality to the new vehicle standards, potentially by affecting the size of the vehicles, the weight of the vehicles that are being sold in your country, you're going to have to focus much more on those avoid and shift type policy measures. Particularly, I would say there's plenty of opportunities to make energy savings on the shift side. So getting people to shift from private modes to public transport modes or cycling. And so working with your transport ministries, working potentially with municipalities to actually, I think one of the real barriers is actually working out what the energy savings are. But this could be a fruitful area to make more savings on transport in the future. So there we are. That was just a very quick kind of macro overview of the transport sector, and I will leave it there unless anyone has any questions.
Just to be clear, in the pie chart you show the savings from cross-cutting measures that are from all sectors, or you estimate the share that's related to transport? And maybe at the same time, Didier, if you can move to the stage as your next, that would be wonderful.
So the savings from the cross-cutting measures are not the estimate of what the transport savings are, because we don't know what those are. But we do know whether it's possible to make savings in those cross-cutting measures. So so there are some cross-cutting measures where transport is explicitly excluded. We don't include those in the stats. But there are other measures, like a lot of obligation schemes, where transport actions are an option, but we don't know from the statistics what proportion of the savings are from transport. Similarly with voluntary agreements, and indeed some taxation measures that cut across various fuels. Those savings are not reported by sector, so we don't try and estimate that, no. Okay, so Dario says half from transport, so that actually is not what I was expecting. So that's interesting information, thank you. This is in Italy. Okay, I'll leave it there. Thanks very much. I'll pass over back to Didier.
Good morning, everyone. Our officer in the Commission like to have cross-fertilization among programs. So I invite ENSMOV in ODYSSEE, and then ENSMOV invite ODYSSEE to present our activities. There are some of you which participate to the ODYSSEE-MURE project, so I apologize for them that they know more or less everything. So I will present mainly the news, what we are developing this round, how it works. Okay, so I will present what is new during this 2022-25 program. the most important thing is geographical coverage. We have before 30 countries, and now we are covering more than 40 countries, including energy community countries. So this is new. We have different products that I will present to you later on. This project is for monitoring energy efficiency at EU and national level, relying on two main tools, two databases. ODYSSEE, which is an energy database on energy demand and energy efficiency indicators, and the MURE database, which is a database on national energy efficiency policy. So in one way, we can say that the ODYSSEE database relies on top-down methodology to assess energy savings, and the MURE database, it's more linked to bottom-up evaluation. We have a lot of meetings already. I will not insist on that. I will present some new developments that we are introducing from a methodological point of view. First of all, we would like to introduce the concept of energy efficiency first principle. And to do that, we propose to add to the final demand by fuel type a new fuel, which is energy efficiency, that will be evaluated through the ODYSSEE database. And you can see what is the contribution of energy efficiency compared to the other fuel. And from that, we can say that energy efficiency is the first fuel in Europe. Whoop. Whoop, just go too fast. Sorry about that. Okay, then we will develop a lot of social media presence. An example, it's this Wikipedia letters. Frankly speaking, I don't know which person do it, but at least there is a Wikipedia page. And we will have videos, and we have several new tools that has been developed for improving our dissemination. Okay, about the work program for 2024, we have developed a series of policy brief. A policy brief, it's 8 pages, let's say, and each of the partners, we select one topic of interest, and they develop some political analysis on our database. And based on this policy brief, we have around 25 policy briefs. There is a series of webinars, which are related to this policy brief. And this is something that we have developed with the Leonardo University. We have an updating every year, both on ODYSSEE and MURE. And for the moment, we have 21 data. And in June, we will have 2022 data for ODYSSEE. For MURE, it's more every time we have a new policy, we introduce it. So in principle, the MURE database should be updated, let's say, every time. But we will have formally an update of the MURE database next summer. We have a tool which is a policy assessment tool. It was developed for the Commission by another project. And the idea is that we will take advantage of our collaborative process to adapt this model to national case studies. So we will have 3 or 4 countries which provide the assessment, policy assessment tool. The idea is when you have a baseline scenario and a more advanced scenario, we will explain the gap between with the contribution of different policies. the scope for those the scope for those which are waiting for a date. The next regional meeting will be in Roma in end of September, and we expect 120 experts, since the ODYSSEE network in total gather 120 experts. I don't know if something will happen. Okay. You have here the list of policy brief. I will not go in detail. You can find that in the website. But this is under the responsibility of each of the partners. For example, if I have understood, IECP will make something on fuel poverty. And thank you for that. So it's on a voluntary basis. I don't know if I think my friend from Motiva, I don't know if you have, yes, you have it. It will be on sufficiency policies and indicators. This is a new topic that we will develop in our database. We have classic energy efficiency indicators, and we will develop indicator for sufficiency and indicator on fuel poverty. Ah, c'est là. Okay, this is some examples. You have here one of the most popular indicator. This is what we call the energy efficiency index. It's an alternative to the energy intensity, which it's a bad proxy of energy efficiency. And you can see here the development for the European Commission at the EU level. This graph exists for all the member states. And you can see this is not a good result. It seems we have a slowing down of energy efficiency improvement since 2014. So you have, of course, the COVID issues and so on. But if you look carefully, you see there is a slowing down of energy efficiency, despite we have more and more policies. So we have maybe too much policy kill policies, or we have to think and analyze for that. And this happened more or less every, in all the sector, except in the transportation sector. Another example of this is a decomposition analysis. And if I have understood well, Eurostat will start to use that approach. We do that for the last 30 years. And the news is that we will translate this type of graph, which explains the contribution of energy saving in the total energy demand variation, in terms of CO2. So we will be able to explain the CO2 emission variation according to different drivers, including fuel substitution, level of activities, efficiency, etc. For the MURE database, it's more linked to your, let's say, job in ENSMOV. ENSMOV, we have around 3,000 policies described in 2 pages, I may say, with a detailed description of the policies. And we are quite active in the network, despite we exist from the last 30 years. We can see that half of the measures has been updated or newly added. So, I mean, the network is still active, and this is very important. And what is new is that we add some button for and some parameters where we can select, or we can select what are the energy efficiency measures labeled as sufficiency measures with different type of categories, avoiding, substitution of energy saving, adjustment of energy savings. This is completely new, and I think we are alone, I may say, in the world to do that. And same for fuel poverty. So this is something that we launched newly, and I think it could be interesting also for you. Up, you go too fast. Sorry about that. About other news. This is a famous scoreboard. I don't know if you are aware of that. There is a scoreboard on hospital, on university, and we launched an energy efficiency scoreboard comparing all the country among us. And we do it first time in 2021, and we have update next one. Okay. So we done a 2021 scoreboard, and then we update it. How it works, to avoid the question, we have 3 criteria. The trends, based on 2010, this is new. Before, the trend was from 2000 to the recent year. So we changed the reference year. Second criteria, it's the level of efficiency. For example, 6 liters per 100 kilometers for cars in Italy. And what is linked to your activity, it's the impact of energy efficiency policy. And we do that based on the NECP declaration. So it's also it's quantitative information, but it's also official information because it's provided by the government. And this is clearly the value of this scoreboard compared to those. There are not too much. There is one from ACEEE and maybe one from IEA, but they will certainly not take into account the impact of the measures. So the 3 criteria are weighted 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. We have a lot of discussion about this weighting, but at least we weight this criteria. So the winner is at the ACEEE scoreboard at world level for the 25 most healthy economies was France. Maybe you were, I see your face, you were surprised that France was #1. It's a US think tank, so it's not a poet. And then we do it for Europe, and the winner is Luxembourg. So you may be surprised by that. But what is also interesting is to see the rest of the list: Germany, France, Latvia, Denmark, and so on. So it's the result, and in the website you can find all the details why Germany, and we have a presentation this morning, we should explain why Germany is #2. And you can see, for example, in policy criteria, Germany ranked #1. Congratulations. And it was what you mentioned this morning. So as all this work, especially on ODYSSEE, has been a basis for ISO standards that I wrote with one friend on energy saving calculations. So all this methodology, it's a base of a lot of work, and I implement that methodology in 70 countries. So as a conclusion, ENSMOV can, we are interested by your analysis, what you present this morning. For me, I keep this idea. I will check if all the measures that proposed by Germany are in the MURE database. We also check your analysis. For instance, in our scoreboard, Luxembourg seems #1, and in your analysis, Luxembourg is the last one in terms of Article 7 implementation. So we have to think about that. And so to summarize, there is a good relationship between ENSMOV and MURE, and we can take advantage of both this database. Thank you for your attention, and go to our website.